In a town about 15 miles rather from where we are, called Irpin, they were shelling it all day, and as such, thousands of desperate people were desperately trying to flee across a bombed-out bridge to the relative safety of the capital. How long Kyiv itself remains safe, though, nobody knows, and that's because Russian forces are increasing their push towards the city, and it is thought to be just a matter of time now till they try to take it. Across the country, they have been besieging other cities as well. Putin's forces continue to bombard civilians. In Mariupol, a ceasefire had been announced to allow civilians to evacuate, but that fell apart almost immediately as Russian forces shelled the safe corridors out. President Zelensky had a call with senators earlier today. He reiterated he needs more weapons. He also tore into what he has called a weak NATO for refusing the no-fly zone, and he spoke about Russia's losses.
The Russian army didn't reach its goal, though it reached almost 10,000 killed Russian servicemen. 10,000 is a horrific figure. They are boys of 18, 20 years old, very young boys, almost children. They are soldiers who had no explanation of what they were sent to fight for.
Ukrainians are doing their best to fight back, and we have seen some successes. Certainly the Javelins and the Stingers have allowed them to take down some helicopters, some jets, and hold back some armoured convoys. And as a result, there's a fair amount of hope here in the country, and we've heard defiant voices, and we've seen people ready, preparing for what they believe will be the full invasion, particularly here in the city of Kyiv. Belarusian authorities said that there would be a third round of diplomatic talks starting on Monday, though the fact is at this point very few people think that there's much hope in those at this point. Lawrence?
Ben, excellent coverage. Thank you so much. Let's bring in our own Lucas Tomlinson. He's live in Lviv tonight. Lucas, what are you hearing about that convoy? Will they be able to stop it?
Well, Lawrence, the Pentagon for the last 3 days has said that convoy is stalled, this miles-long convoy. And if you look at those satellite images, where are the Russian soldiers? They seem to have disappeared. So there's a lot of questions surrounding that convoy. It certainly looks like it's in no condition right now to assault the city, and certainly questions abound, and also the Ukrainian forces. Now, earlier, we have learned that in the past 24 hours, Lawrence, 9 Russian aircraft have been shot down out of the sky, 5 fighter jets and 4 attack helicopters. Fox News does not independently confirm those numbers. Those are reports. But if this is true, that would be the largest loss for air forces in an air force for decades. You'd have to go back to the Soviet experience in Afghanistan when they lost a number of their gunships, or perhaps even the Vietnam War. Lawrence?
Lucas, excellent reporting. We'll check in with you later tonight. Joining us now, General Keith Kellogg, the former National Security Advisor to Vice President Pence. General, thanks so much for joining us tonight. So I want to get your reaction to these cluster bombs that are being used against civilians. Early on, Putin avoided targeting the civilians. Why is he doing it now?
Yeah, Lawrence, thanks for having me. Look, it's pretty simple. We are heading into Act 2 of a multi-act play. It's probably a Greek tragedy when you look at it. And what I mean by that is we're going to reach a point where he's got to go into the city of Kyiv, into the build-up areas. He's probably going to have to go back to the old Soviet style of use of artillery, which will be massive, and start to take down that city. And he's going to use every weapon he has to do, which will include cluster bombs, to take down that city. It's a city of about 3 million. You know, and I think then Americans and the rest of the world are going to take a big pause, because they're going to look at a city that has been around for 2,000 years and is the seat of government of Ukraine, and they try to decapitate the government, meaning take it out, bring a new government in. And the question is going to be, okay, are we going to continue to let this happen as a world body? I understand a UN no-fly zone. I've got it. It takes all 30 members to agree to have a no-fly zone. We don't want to do that because of Article 5. But maybe we ought to go to the UN and say, why don't we have a get the whole world postured together to go against what the Russians are currently doing in Ukraine. You know, I'm looking at this 2 ways. You look at President Zelensky. He's asking for more sanctions, which are happening. He's also asking for a no-fly zone, which is an immediate way to reduce the kinetic fight happening right now. And we're honoring one, but we're really not honoring the second. And we need to take a hard look at that and what we're going to do going forward, because you just mentioned it. When he starts using things like cluster bombs or thermobaric weapons, it is really changing the whole nature of warfare, because now the civilian population is going to be heavily hit by it. And so I think we're seeing a change. And what I would do if I was President Biden, I'd get a hold of Jake Sullivan. I'd say, go take a bunch of people, go over to the EOB, the Executive Office Building next to the West Wing in the White House, go up to the 5th floor, feed them a cold pizza and warm beer, and come up with a bunch of solutions. Because right now we're kind of beating our chest. This looks really good. We're all together. It all sounds good. But it's going to start breaking apart when you see the civilian casualties that are probably going to occur in the next week or so.
General, when Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, speaks, I listen closely. He said something earlier that I want you to get your reaction to. He said that he was thankful thus far for the assistance that he's gotten from our country. But he also said that if the Biden administration had acted sooner, America would have acted sooner, there would not have been a war. Do you agree with that?
100%. Lawrence, it's so true. I don't know why we as a nation and the rest of the allies as well, when they started building up their forces, and they built them up well before Christmas, when they were building 30,000, 40,000, 60,000, 70,000. Look, Putin does not bluff. When he said he was coming into Ukraine, he's going to go into Ukraine, and we should have been building up armaments back then. We didn't. We waited. And part of the reason we said is because we believed if we did it was going to be escalatory. Well, now we're too late. But if we had been reacting, let's say 6 weeks ago, we could have, in fact, let's say an example. We could have trained up pilots that are current pilots in the Ukrainian Air Force on things like the A-10 and then transfer those weapon systems to the Ukraine. It doesn't take a year to train a new pilot. You're taking a pilot, putting him on a new platform, or giving him more ammunition, doing something we just, earlier on, we delayed. It's a fault. He's absolutely correct. I wish we had done that, but now we have to go forward from where we're at and see where we're going to.
General, I got to run, but if you could give me a 20-second response to this. There seems to be some back and forth between the president of Ukraine and the administration. The administration is saying that they're sending weapons. The Ukrainians are still requesting for more weapons. What is the truth, and what is that discrepancy?
Yeah. Well, the truth is we just, you take as much as you can get. Years ago when I was in combat, I put as much ammunition on my body as I could possibly carry. I didn't need so much as the food, but I wanted ammo. So he keeps saying I need more ammo, and he's correct. Give more ammo, more munitions. That is correct, because you need every round you've got. So what he's saying is true. I just wish we had done it earlier.
General, thanks so much. We always appreciate your insight. As Ukraine pleads for help, Americans in Russia are being told to leave the country immediately for their safety. And now we're learning that a WNBA star, Brittany Griner, has been detained in Russia on drug charges. Representatives for Griner are trying to get her released and back home, but with tension with the Kremlin so high, fans are sounding the alarm for her safety. Kristen Whiten worked for the State Department, and he joins us now. Kristen, tell us what we need to know about this. She's a Texan. She's an American. We want her back home safely. Does this rise to the escalation of being potentially, having 10 years behind bars?
Right. Well, certainly not in any practical sense of the matter. And the facts are thin, and no one's admitted to anything here, and we haven't seen any actual evidence. Certainly, we can't take the Russians' word for it. I guess the allegation is she entered Russia with some vape cartridges that contain THC oil or something similar to that. If that is true, and that's a big if, again, we don't know the full facts here, then clearly that would be for personal use and not for the intent to distribute within Russia. We're obviously not dealing even with a seriously alleged drug dealer. This just the timing of this, even though she was arrested actually before the war started, is awfully suspicious. So this does fit a Russian pattern of harassing people, especially VIPs. Members of the WNBA can actually do quite well in Russia. She's involved in a team in Yekaterinburg and can make over $1 million per winter. So this looks like harassment of an American. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the State Department, they're awfully cautious about telling Americans not to go places, so most travelers wouldn't have a problem, but this person certainly has.
Well, Kristen, the State Department has issued a travel warning saying Americans need to leave immediately.
Yep, you know, and if you don't need to be in Russia, maybe you shouldn't be in Russia. But we're not actually at war with this country, although, frankly, if we start doing things like no-fly zones, we will be at war with Russia, with a nuclear-armed power. You know, insofar, you can actually still get into Russia. You can get there from the Middle East. You can get there from Turkey. You might be able to get there from East Asia. If you have serious business there, I think you could probably go, and if you astutely follow the laws, you won't have a problem. But nonetheless, the State Department, out of its usual abundance of caution, is suggesting people not go.
You know, Kristen, I only have a few more seconds, but with Russia making this move, and as you said, they detained her before the war even started, are they poking the bear? Are they testing the commander-in-chief?
Oh, absolutely. I think everything they do is a test, and sometimes the tests are apparent and sometimes they're not apparent. But frankly, they're seeing in Washington someone who shoots his mouth off, talks big, and the consequences really don't meet the billing.
Sure. Thanks so much for your insights, sir. Still ahead, the strength and solidarity of the Ukrainian people have been a beacon of hope for the world. An update from inside the war zone when we come back. Don't go anywhere. Have come to a screeching halt. Nearly 1.5 million refugees have fled the country, and in what is now the biggest movement of the people in Europe since World War II. Day after day, we are seeing life in this sovereign country be destroyed. Last week on Cross Country, we spoke to one mother determined to get her family to safety. Watch.
There is a huge war, and now we are paying with our homes that we have lost. I have parents back in Kiev, and I'm not sure if I will ever see them again because we don't know how it will go.
This story is not unique. It's happened across that country. Let's bring in former State Department spokesperson Morgan Ortagus. You know, Morgan, I didn't expect to see something like this in my lifetime.
Yeah, and I think it's only going to get worse, Lawrence, when you start to look at the numbers. So we're very early into this war. We've seen already over 1 million Ukrainians that are refugees. To put it in context for your audience, Lawrence, if you look at Syria, that civil war went on around 10 years, and it's still somewhat ongoing. The Syrians have about 21 million people. They had, over that 10-year period, about 6 million refugees. So let's contrast that with Ukraine, which has about 44 million people, and already just weeks in, we see over 1 million refugees. So I think while Syria isn't the best comparison, it at least leads us to understand how serious and how delicate and fragile this war is already when it comes to the cost that Ukrainians are paying, especially those that are now becoming refugees.
Sure. Later on the show, we're going to have a Ukrainian immigrant that is here in this country, owns a restaurant in New York. He's paying for flights for his employees to go back to Ukraine to fight this fight. It is an American issue now because we have Ukrainian Americans here. I want to switch topics, though, with you because we found out earlier this week that America is actually negotiating with Iran and Russia for another nuclear deal. I mean, shouldn't we have known about this earlier? They've been doing this behind closed doors for a while. Are you surprised to hear about this, Morgan?
No, Lawrence, because I have been shouting about this from the rooftop, so thank you for reporting on it and paying attention. It's incredibly important. So what our audience needs to know is right now, while this war has been going on, while Russia has been invading Ukraine, Russia, instead of treating them as the international pariah that they deserve to be treated, Biden and his team have given Russia legitimacy in Vienna at the negotiating table. They're not just negotiating with the Iranians, with the Chinese. They are negotiating on behalf of the United States. And that's incredibly important. Remember the Iran deal. This is what President Obama got us into. President Trump got us out of it because he said this doesn't actually prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon. It just kicks the can down the road. They continue to fund and foment terrorism around the Middle East. So this is a big problem. We saw the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, insinuated that they may even buy oil from Iran. So just to again, to get to the bottom line here, Biden is not not allowing America to be energy independent. He's really not opening up for new exploration and new drilling the way we need to be in order to be energy independent. Most importantly, he's not putting the crucial sanctions that are required on the Russian energy sector. Now, a lot of people think, well, he's just doing that because he doesn't want the price of oil to go up and that would hurt Americans. I think it's far more sinister than that, Lawrence. I think what you're going to see next week is that President Biden and his team are going to unveil a deal that is actually worse, that is more disastrous than the 2014 Iran deal that Obama negotiated. And in that deal, I believe that's why they haven't negotiated, or excuse me, why they haven't sanctioned Russian oil yet. Because not only are they going to allow the Russians to continue their energy sector, we may even be able to buy oil from Iran in this new deal. It is going to inflame the Middle East. And the Biden administration is not serious about countering Russia when they allow them to negotiate on our behalf in Vienna today with the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, the Islamic Republic of Iran.
You know, Morgan, I want to stay with you on this with Iran for a second. You alluded to this about the Secretary of Transportation talking about the buying oil from Iran. Last time I checked, they were the #1 state sponsor of terror. So is America safe? I mean, we were assured that the adults would be back in the room, that they knew what they were doing, that they were going to keep Americans safe. Are Americans more safe today?
No, absolutely not. I mean, Russia has invaded Ukraine. We saw, listen, you know this, Lawrence, you covered this. I was a part of the Abraham Accords. We handed to the Biden administration, because of President Trump, the first peace deals between Israel and Arab states in 26 years. So what happens when Biden and his team take over? Within 3 months, Hamas is attacking Israel. Within 7 months, Kabul has fallen to the Taliban. And now within a year, you're seeing a ground war in Europe because Russia has invaded. The Biden administration, they themselves said that their plan, that their strategy was to deter Russia from invading Ukraine. They failed at that strategy. And what we're seeing now is that the Iran deal is far more important to them than actually countering Russia. I can't tell you what a dereliction of duty it is from a diplomacy perspective to have Russia negotiating on our behalf so that we can buy Russian and Iranian oil next week instead of drilling more here at home. We should be drilling in the United States. We should be energy independent. We should be treating Russia and Iran as the international pariahs they are, not giving them legitimacy on the world stage. It's preposterous.
Yeah, I don't care where you stand on the issue as it relates to the climate. I think most logical people would say that us being energy independent did not empower Russia. And it seems like the Biden administration is married to their ideology. Morgan, I want to get your comment on these oligarchs. It seems like we finally started to go after them, release sanctions on them, on their yachts. They own a lot of apartment buildings right here in New York City. What took so long?
Well, listen, I think we should take their yachts, we should take their boats, their planes, anything else we can get their hands on. Listen, their children, they all go to school in the United States, right? Everybody wants to come here to go to college. We could kick their kids out of school. This is actually the kind of things that we did under President Trump and Mike Pompeo when we were going after human rights abusers and other Chinese Communist Party officials. We also prevented them and their families from having visas to the United States. So none of these people's children should be in school in the United States right now. We should be canceling all the visas.
Morgan, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
It's the same reason.
Yes, to get to that, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just got to get an answer to this.
Go ahead.
You know, it seems like the administration so far has been so reactive. I mean, we're getting tips, and we'll talk about this later on the show, that we knew that they were going to invade. They told China. China told them to do it after the Olympics. So why not do this before?
Because we have continued, this administration has continued to pursue a series of half measures, hoping that if we don't irritate the Russians too much, maybe they won't go further. Now, that strategy hasn't proven out. Again, I also think it's far more sinister. I think they want to be back in the JCPOA, in the Iran deal, more than they actually want to counter Russia and Ukraine. Under this new JCPOA, the Iranians can potentially do things like give Russia $500 million that they owe them. They weren't able to do that because of the Trump sanctions on them. So the Russians may get $500 million from Iran. They may also, the Iranians may be able to buy conventional weapons and advanced weaponry from the Russians. It is a joke. If anyone thinks that this administration is serious about countering Russia, it's a total joke. Just look at what they're allowing to happen in Vienna. They are willing to sacrifice Ukraine for the Iran deal that they want to get back into.
Yeah. As if Ukraine was enough. I mean, now it's starting to impact us here at home as well. Morgan, you're a trusted voice on this. Thanks so much for joining the program. Still here, Ukrainian President Zelensky may be the Kremlin's top target, but it's not stopping him from calling for an in-person sit-down with Putin. Plus, what role does China play in Russia's war? We'll talk to an expert on that. Don't go anywhere.